Benfica have reportedly registered their interest in Tosen, while Chelsea continue to work through a huge center-back problem. But why Tosen? Why would Chelsea be willing to sell a defender who has Premier League experience, has already shown that he can play at this level, and has been involved heavily during pre-season? The answer might have very little to do with Tosen being a bad defender. It could have everything to do with what Alonzo wants Chelsea's defense to look like. When Alonzo arrived, one of the biggest problems waiting for him wasn't a lack of center-backs. It was the exact opposite. Chelsea had too many. And after the arrival of Maxence Lacroix, the situation became even more complicated. Alonzo has already made his position clear. He wants roughly 4 or 5 center-backs in his final squad. Chelsea had far more than that. So somebody had to go. Trevoh Chalobah has already left for Como, while Benoit Badiashile is now strongly linked with a move to Naples. Axel Disasi is also expected to leave, and Tosen is now being linked with Benfica. That tells us something important. This isn't necessarily about one player being singled out. Alonzo is redesigning the entire center-back department. He doesn't simply need defenders who can win tackles and defend crosses. He wants defenders who can function inside his possession structure. Alonso's teams are very fluid. They can build with a back four, change the shape during possession, and push the team high up the pitch. And when the ball is lost, the reaction is aggressive. That means the center-backs aren't just defending their own penalty box. They are often defending huge spaces behind them. They need to be comfortable when isolated. They need to make decisions quickly. They need to progress the ball, and they need to understand when to step forward and when to protect the space behind them. Also, the arrival of Maxence Lacroix is particularly important here. Chelsea didn't spend around £52 million on Lacroix simply to add another body to the squad. Alonzo has described him as a reliable defender who can bring power to the defensive line and make an immediate impact. So, if Lacroix is being brought in as one of the central pieces of the new defense, the question becomes, who plays alongside him? Levi Colwill is still one of the biggest pieces of Chelsea's defensive future. Wesley Fofana, when fit, offers qualities that Alonzo could value. Josh Achimpong has also become increasingly important because of his versatility and long-term potential. And then there are the younger center-backs Chelsea have invested in. Suddenly, Tosen is no longer competing for 1 or 2 positions. He's competing for a place in a much smaller group. And that is probably the biggest reason why his future is now uncertain. There's also another factor Chelsea cannot ignore: squad management. Reports have suggested that as many as 15 players could still leave before the transfer window closes. So Chelsea aren't simply making footballing decisions. They need to reduce the squad. They need to create room. They need to balance the books. And they need to make sure Alonzo isn't trying to manage a group that is simply too big. That makes players like Tosen valuable in another way. If Chelsea decide that he isn't one of their preferred 4 or 5 center-backs, selling him could solve 2 problems at once. It creates space, and it generates money. But there's another side to this story. What happens if Tosen really leaves? Chelsea would be taking a risk. Center-back is one of the most physically demanding positions in football, and Chelsea already have questions around the fitness of some of their defenders. Wesley Fofana's injury history is obvious. Mamadou Sarr and Aaron Anselmino have also had pre-season fitness issues. So, reducing the numbers sounds logical, but reducing them too aggressively could leave Alonzo with another problem later in the season. And this is why the Tosen decision is more interesting than it first appears. Chelsea aren't necessarily choosing between a good defender and a bad defender. They're choosing between different profiles. They are deciding what their defense should look like under Xabi Alonso. And if Tosen doesn't fit that picture as well as Colwill, Lacroix, Fofana, or the younger options, Chelsea may decide that his value is greater on the transfer market than it is on the pitch. That doesn't mean Tosen has suddenly become a poor player. It means Chelsea's priorities have changed. And honestly, this is one of the clearest signs yet that the Alonso era is going to look very different from what came before. For years, Chelsea's problem was buying players. Now, Alonso's biggest challenge is deciding which ones actually belong in his team. Tosen could be one of the casualties of that process. And if Benfica really do push forward with their interest, we could soon find out whether Chelsea are prepared to let him go. But here's the bigger question for Chelsea fans. If Tosen leaves, who becomes Alonso's fourth or fifth center back? Because that decision could tell us even more about the manager's defensive blueprint than the Tosen sale itself. If you want more Chelsea analysis as the Alonso project takes shape, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.